Or, oh, I hate that. Freaking hate Discord sometimes. Hey Blake,
Yeah, what's up?
I like your profile pic.
Thanks. Felt cute, so I posted it.
Yeah, of course.
You know how it is.
Of course.
I like yours too. It's almost better. Almost.
Almost. Just almost. Oh.
Okay, so hopefully now everyone's over on the YouTube, so I'm gonna mute myself on Discord. And so you can go to dsuprog.club/questions and type your questions there, and someone will be watching those, or I'll be watching those actually, and I'll be answering those as they come up. So this meeting is Git and GitHub. Now you might be asking, what is Git? Well, Git is a version control software. What does that mean? You can save your progress throughout various stages of a project. So basically, you have a file system. You've got branching timelines. That's not what they call it, but that's what I call it because that's a fun way to call it. And basically, it means that, basically that means that you can have different versions of your project from different times. Like, if you take your project into a different direction, then you can decide to go back to a different version and change some things, and then you can work on both of those two versions at the same time. And you can also have multiple people working on a project at once. And it's not like in Google Drive where you're literally editing the same file at the same time, but it makes it so that you can both be making changes to the project and then both push those changes into the same folder essentially. And I'll have better terminology once I introduce that terminology. Some other version control software that aren't as prevalent but are still fairly popular, so you might end up using them at one point. You've got Subversion, Mercurial, and CVS, which stands for Concurrent Versions System or something like that. And then, what is GitHub? Well, GitHub is a hosting site for Git. So you can take your Git projects and put them on GitHub, and then it'll manage all that stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. A lot of people phrase it as what's the difference between Git and GitHub, but that's not really a good way to get the straight answer, which is they're two completely different things, but one happens to use the other. And GitHub is mainly used for open source projects, so if I'm working on some sort of software that I want other people to also work on to make it good, things like Blender and GIMP and Inkscape are all popular open source softwares. I might put my project on GitHub and be like, hey, here it is, you can work on the code, or just look at the source code. Also, GitHub has a premium account system. You can do most things with a normal account, but you can have a free premium account if you sign up as a student. So it's pretty worth it since it's free. With the main thing that allows you to do is have private repositories instead of public. So you can make projects that only you can look at. And now here we go on to the vocabulary. You may have noticed that on the last slide I used the word repository. This is what that means. It's basically just a project folder. It's where all your files are. It has all the different versions of your files and keeps all the changes. But for the purposes of using Git, you can just think of the repository as the project folder. Then we have branches. And branches is what I was talking about with the parallel timelines earlier, where you can have different versions of your project. And the two main branches that you'll be working with are the master branch, also known as the main branch, and the local branch. And the master branch is like the primary version of your project, and that's usually the one that's on GitHub. And so that's like when you're done changing all the stuff, you'll push it all into that branch. And then the local branch is the one that's on your machine, the one that's on your computer. So there can be like a whole bunch of different local branches of the same project. And so to create a Git project, you use Git init. And that just takes a folder on your computer and essentially turns it into a Git project or a repository. But if you have a Git repository that you created on GitHub or that somebody else created, you can use git clone and then the URL for that repository, and that copies that and creates a local branch on your computer. So it basically just downloads all the files. And then if you want to make actual changes that are stored, you use git commit. And the -m over here, this part, with each commit you leave a commit message that says what you changed in that commit. And so like if I had a file that was like a list of names and I wanted to just add one name to it and then save that change, I might say added name to name file in this commit message. And so if you type this command into Git, the way you put in the commit message is by just in your default text editor will just open up and you write it in there and save it and close it. Or you can do -m and then your commit message in quotes, and that'll just put it in as immediately. And then commit is used as both a noun and a verb. So like there is such thing as a commit, and then you also commit things. So when you commit your changes, you're creating a new commit. Now this is a bit more complicated, but we have staging. And so the main way that you'll use this is with git add. And git add says, hey, I want to change these files, save these changes that are in these files. So you might say git add names.txt, and that'll say, okay, in the next commit, add the changes that were made in this file. And then you can use git add -a to just automatically add all the files that have changes. And if you accidentally do that and want to reset what you're adding, you can just use git reset, and that will clear all of what's in the staging. And you can use git rm to say, hey, I want this file to be deleted from the repository, and then in the next commit that file won't be in the repository because you deleted it. So once you've staged all your files and once you've committed them, the way you get them off of your local branch, which is your computer, into the master branch, which is usually on GitHub, is you use push. And this command right here is how you get it if you have it on like GitHub and you're currently on your local, if you're currently in your local branch just editing on your computer, if you use git push-u origin master, that'll just put it onto the main GitHub branch. Whoops. I don't really memorize what this means. I just know that's what I do to push that onto the main branch. So then the opposite of push is pull. And so pull does the opposite. It pulls the commits from another branch into yours. So if there are two people working on the same project on their own machines, they have two separate local branches. So then if one of them pushes commits to the master, which is once again usually GitHub, then the other person doesn't have those changes yet. So if they want to get those changes, they can use git pull to essentially just get those changes. And now git merge, it merges the changes between the branches. And the reason why that seems pretty similar to pull is because it's part of git pull. It's something that's called when that's done. But the reason I bring it up is because sometimes there are merge conflicts. And that's where if two people are editing the same file in the same place, and one of them pushes their changes and the other one pulls them, then Git won't automatically know what to do in that scenario, and you'll have to manually go through and tell it, I want it to keep this change or both of these changes or neither. And to start to do that, you use git merge. And so you don't necessarily need to know that right away, but it's helpful to at least have in the back of your mind for if that ever happens, or when that ever happens, I should say, because it's not that uncommon. Now the last vocabulary word we have here is git ignore. Now git ignore is a file that's in pretty much every Git repository, and it just tells Git what to ignore. So if you have a file name in your git ignore that's like, well, I should say, if you have a file in your repository that you don't want to have on the main branch, but you do want to have just in your own project and don't want to have to get rid of it every time you commit, you can just you can put the name of the file in the git ignore file. And then when you do git add -a, it won't include that as a change, and Git just kind of ignores it. So now that we've done all the vocab, let's get going. This first site is to download Git itself. And if you're on Linux, I think it's already installed, but if it's not, you just use your normal package manager with Git, like apt-get install Git or something like that. But if you're on Windows, you go to git-scm.com and then just go through and download that. And then you should also create an account on GitHub, because when I go through and do the example pretty soon, I'll need an account for that. And so while you do that, I'm gonna make sure I didn't miss any questions. And just to confirm, nobody's submitted any questions using the questions page, right? Because I don't see any here, and I just want to make sure that it isn't broken. It's fine if you haven't. And then for attendance, I believe, and Blake can correct me on this if that's not the way we have it set up, I believe if you go to the meetings page on dsuprog.club and then click on view meeting for this meeting, then that'll mark you as having attended. Okay, so now let's get started with an example. So I'm here on github.com, and so I want to make a new repository. So I click on new over here. You gotta make a repository name, so I'm gonna call this Git example. And I'll make this one private, just because it won't be a very good project. Don't really want to show it off. And so down here, you can automatically add some things. For example, the gitignore file, which I'm going to add, and a readme. And this will just add a description, essentially, to your project. This is usually good for if you want other people to look at your project, to have a readme in there. And then a license. This is for legal stuff, for telling people, yes, you can legally use this code, or no, you can't legally use this code in certain circumstances. Usually the MIT license is a good one for this one, I think. And so, oh, also the description here, I'll just put this is a test for Git, and then create. So now I have this here, but I want to have it on my own machine on this computer. So I'm going to go over into my file system. Well, actually first I'll copy the URL because I'll need that later. Then I'll go into my file system and I right click, and if you installed Git properly, there should be a Git bash here or Git GUI here. I'm going to use bash so that I can use the commands. And if you don't see those, but you know that you do have Git installed, then you can just open Git bash and then navigate to the folder using cd and then the folder name. And so what I want to do right now is clone, because I want to copy the project from Git, well, from GitHub into my computer. So I use git clone, and then I paste the URL. And by default, that'll create a project folder with the same name as the project, but you can also change that by adding the name after the URL. And so here's the license and readme that it added, and if there were other files in the project, it would have added those too. And so let's make this an actual project by adding a text document, and let's call this one main.txt. And so then I edit this with any editor that I want. I'm going to use Notepad, and let's add a couple lines here with just a number on each line, because why not? And then I'll save this, and now this is a change that is on my local branch but is not on my master branch. So if I'm done making this, well, so if I'm done with this individual change, because you usually want to commit relatively often, I'm gonna go back into the git bash and commit. And so the first thing you gotta do is git add. So since it's only one file, I can just do that one manually with main.txt. Oh, I'm still in the folder above this one, so it didn't recognize it. So I'll do cd git example to go into the git example directory. And so now if I do git add, it'll just add it to the thing. And now I can do git commit, and then it pops up in a text editor saying what I want the commit message to be. And so I'll say added main.txt, and then I'll save this and close it, and then it'll automatically go through and do the commit afterwards. And so now I have the commit on my machine, and I can either go do more things and then commit those and then push all those commits, or I can just push this commit now, and that's what I'm gonna do. And so oh, and actually one more command that I forgot about is git status. And that basically just tells you information about like the branch and the and what you have added and stuff. So if I'll make a new file here. I'll call it not main. So if I were to add not main, and then type git status, as you can see here, it says what changes are about to be committed. And I'll actually try to make this bigger, just in case it's not showing up on the stream properly. New file, not main.txt. And if I have another new file and call it definitely not main, and that's not how you spell definitely, but I'm talking as I say this, so, or as I type this, so it makes it a bit hard. And then go into git bash. If I do git status, you can see it says, hey, you added a file, but it's not in the commit right now, or it's not being tracked for commit. So if I was changing a whole bunch of files, I might want to use git status immediately before I commit to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I don't actually want not main and definitely not main, so I'm going to delete those. And since I currently have not main staged in the commit changes, I'll do git reset to unstage everything. And now, nothing to commit, working tree clean. So now we get back to git push. And so I type in the command, the git push -u origin master, and then at some point in this process it'll ask you for a username and password. Since I'm already logged in, it didn't ask me, but it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out where to put in your username and password. It would be for GitHub that you would type that in. But Git saves your username and password locally on the, so you don't need to type it in every time that you want to push changes to a GitHub project. So anyways, now that I have those changes pushed, if I refresh the page on here, you can see that now my main file with the numbers on each line is here. And so now let's get into a different folder to simulate a different person working on the project. And let's just call this folder 2. So this person 2 is gonna clone the repository. Whoops. Need to recopy the thing. They're gonna clone this. Okay, so now person 2 has it on their machine. And they go in and they make a change to main. They delete 4 and 5, because who needs those numbers anyway? Then they save and they git add main.txt. Or actually, this person, they use git add -a all the time. And that just adds all the files that have changes. And so now they commit, and this person uses git commit -m because they don't want to open a separate text editor. They just want to do everything in the command line. And they're going to say deleted 4 and 5. And then they're going to push -u origin master. And so now, if I go back here, 4 and 5 are gone. And you can see the latest commit was 21 seconds ago. And if I click on that, it says deleted 4 and 5. And that was done by me. So let's go back here, and as you can see here, it says which commit was the most recent for that file. And it says how long ago it was changed. So now let's go back over to person number 1. And they want to make some more changes. Currently, person number 1 still has their 4 and 5 intact. And they want to keep on going with their numbers. So they're adding 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, because person 1 is an overachiever. So then they go through the whole rigmarole of saving and git add and git commit. Added more numbers. And then git push -u origin master. And they're like, oh no, there's an error message. But luckily, this is very easily fixed. So as you can see, it says failed to push some refs to blah blah blah. And it has some hints down here, and hints are always good. And this hint is the one that I'm going to follow. And it says blah 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 git pull. I know that command. That gets other people's changes. So I'm going to do git pull. And then it opens up this, and I'm just going to save and exit because I don't really need to say anything about it. And so you can see that there were 2 deletions, and that's the 3 and 4 that got deleted. So now my file, or 4 and 5, not 3 and 4. So now my file has both of those changes. It has the deleted 4 and 5, and it added the new numbers at the end. But the Git still doesn't have the new numbers because I haven't committed those changes yet. Or I haven't pushed those changes yet. But once I do this, and the error is gone now that I used git pull, if I update this, everything's all up to date. And I think that's all I really needed to show. So I'm gonna hand this one over to questions. But first, on the last page of this presentation, there's a link to the sign-up form for DIGI-KEY. That's that competition that's coming up real soon. And this is the last week that you can sign up, because they need teams chosen by like next Wednesday or something. So sign up really soon, because we need to pick the teams even before that. And if you don't know...
Was there a meeting tonight?
If you don't know where to get this link, it's on the Programming Club website, both in the Resources tab, and if you go into the Meetings tab and click on View Meeting for this meeting, you can just go to the very end. So, any more questions? Oh, and I have confirmed that the questions page does work. So you can use dsuprog.club/questions. And that will submit your questions somewhat anonymously. I would have to go through a whole lot of work to figure out who you are, but if you do something like illegal, then I could figure out who you are. So don't be afraid to ask anything dumb in the questions page. Well, it's looking like nobody has any questions. Just gotta go through and check all the places people could submit them. But that's about it for the stream for today. Have a good day. I'll stick around for just a little bit in case there are any last-minute questions.